Ew! Drew, I can't believe you live with the iPhone 10 camera. Let me just try to take a picture here. Oh my god! Do you realize I zoomed in 20 times and there's noticeable distortion and noise in the... Frankie, it's just... I don't need it to be perfect, you know? It's a phone and it took a picture and I can see what was there at that time. No, Drew, I don't understand. We must be looking at two different pictures, because look at this. In the shadow of the subject, I can't see the microbacteria on the floor because the dynamic range is so bad. Why is the shadow so dark? Frankie, did you notice that the shadow is dark? So that's just kind of what it looks like? No, not enough dynamic range. I can't do this. I cannot wait until Apple switches to 108 megapixels. Then I'll finally be able to capture real life the way it's meant to be viewed. You know, Samsung already made the switch to like 200 megapixels. I'm sorry, what did you say? Scamsung? I heard Scamsung. Is that what I heard? All right, I get it. Well, enjoy your 14 Pro Max then. I will enjoy my 1 terabyte 14 Pro Max, which, yes, thanks to all of my ProRes videos, I've almost filled up already. Good thing I pay for Apple One Premiere and 2 terabytes of iCloud storage. You're so wise, Frank. I look up to you so much. Yes, you do, because I was born first and you were a mistake. We're twins, so if I'm a mistake, are you also Bye-bye now. Okay, let's be frank. So every year at Apple events, and Android events as well, the keynote takes up more and more time talking about cameras, because that, I think, is what smartphone companies have realized is the only thing they can really harp on with nitty-gritty details year after year, and in side-by-side comparisons, it's always so easy to demonstrate year-over-year improvements. Tech reviewers bring it up all the time, and we have these blind camera tests where we rank all of them, and we have scoring websites that take a certain amount of payment from certain companies and might score cameras a certain way. But I think there's a dilemma here that I want to discuss. I think there's a endless pit that we're kind of digging ourselves every time we dwell on wanting to have a better and better camera, because truly this is a moving target, and not just with iPhones. Every year we see iPhones get a little bit better dynamic range, a little bit better contrast, or more photographic styles, or more video features, and Android is constantly trying to leapfrog Apple as well. And depending on who you ask, iPhones have always been left in the dust, at least according to the blind smartphone camera competitions, where we have a bunch of techie people all voting on what makes the best possible image, even though in a lot of these images there's hardly any differences, or there's comparisons where one photo may look different than another based on the lighting environment, but in a different environment a different phone will outperform the other. There's so many factors in everything, but if you're insistent on trying to find what is the best camera, you are constantly going to need to upgrade or side grade to other Android phones and try to figure out who can capture the most real-to-life colors, or just the overall better looking colors. Is real life better, or is photographic beauty better? Like what gets the most likes on Instagram, or what looks the best when compressed on social media, where most of these photos are going anyway. So if you have that standard with yourself, which I see all too often in the tech community, like I just need the best possible camera because that's the camera I'm gonna have with me, you've kind of signed a permanent contract with Apple as long as you have that standard, because the question becomes, how much better does that new camera need to be than your last camera for you to justify spending the $1,000, or even factoring in, okay, you may sell your old iPhone to cover the price of the new one, so maybe it's $200 a year, maybe it's $100 a year if you're able to get a really good resale value, but typically it's not that great, especially if you're doing the iPhone upgrade program or trade-ins. You'll be spending a lot of money on details that are very likely never to be noticed, especially when Apple puts a lot of emphasis on one lens, like the main sensor getting raw modes, but a lot of your photos just involve trying to zoom in, and then you've got the same 3x telephoto as before. Maybe your 2x gets a little bit better, but all of this is getting steamrolled by social media anyway, and every year, I'm just trying to warn you guys, the smartphone camera upgrades are going to get progressively more incremental, harder and harder to notice. That's why when we randomly post a photo that we take, you can't accurately guess what generation of iPhone it was on. You can kind of ballpark, yeah, that was the main sensor sensor, the ultrawide, or the telephoto, but there honestly hasn't been too much emphasis on the ultrawides in recent generation. Like, we got macro with the 13 Pro, but with the 14 Pro, it's still kind of there. The edges of ultrawide are still kind of soft, but doesn't matter for a lot of people because they saw the Apple presentation, and even some people didn't watch the Apple presentation. They're just convinced that, well, it's a higher number and it has Pro on the end, which must mean it has a better camera. A lot of these people just walk into the Apple store and hear the employee say, you know, you really want the 14 Pro because that has a better camera than the regular 14, which the regular 14 is also still better than the 13. How? They won't tell you, but it just is. But you get into this slippery slope of saying, I want the best camera, and that results in you feeling like you have to upgrade because there is something better out there. But what I'm trying to remind you iPhone users is that there very much likely is an Android phone with a better camera than your iPhone. I've seen the side-by-side comparisons, and depending on what you're doing, even in video performance, there are many circumstances where the Android will perform better, but that's constantly changing. Sometimes it's the Pixel, sometimes it's the Galaxy, sometimes it's the Oppo, sometimes it's the Redmi, and if you put this standard on yourself that I just want to have the best camera, you're constantly going to be side grading or upgrading and finding yourself comparing your phone to another, and within a year or less, you're going to have not the best camera anymore. So I'm not trying to say you shouldn't prioritize camera performance in your phones. Of course, these things capture our lives, especially with so many of my friends who have just become parents. They're trying to capture their beautiful moments with their children or capture beautiful moments with grandparents, and I get that you want to preserve that in the best possible quality, but what I do want to challenge you for is if you're showing these pictures and videos to your kids when they're grown up, or to your grandkids, or if you want to show your grandkids one day what your great-great-grandma looked like, are they really going to care in those walks down memory lane about how good the dynamic range is, how noisy the photo is? Or have you noticed at all, I know we're all techie people watching this, but have you noticed that when you go down that memory lane at a family gathering, or when you're looking at old Facebook memories or whatever it is, that people aren't commenting too much about the lens flares or the exposure or how good the blue sky can be seen in the background? No, they're just looking at the face. They're looking at you, at what you used to look like or what they used to look like. And as long as your smartphone camera is capable of preserving roughly what that person looked like, all of these other details are just insignificant, minute background noise, ironically, to convince you that your current phone is not good enough. And the main reason I wanted to highlight this today is because I recently downgraded, as a lot of you know, to the iPhone 10 from my 13 Pro Max, and I'm still taking a lot of pictures and sharing them with friends and family, and I'm noticing that outside of this tech community, no one's really caring. Even inside the tech community, I'll send pictures to my friends that I know watch my videos and stuff, and they don't really care or notice, hey, wait a minute, this is shot on the iPhone 10. I've posted lots of videos that were shot on my iPhone 10, and it never comes up. No one really cares. And yet, in the tech community, in our smartphone camera comparisons, a lot of us are trying to convince you that your iPhone 10 or 10s or 11 has an inferior camera that's just nowhere near good enough compared to what you can get now on a 14 or a 13. And there may be some edge cases where it really makes a night and day difference, like night mode is able to capture that moment, and if you don't have night mode, the moment is therefore ruined because we don't want to use the flash anymore. I guess that's just a bad thing. But I just don't want you guys falling down the trap of pixel peeping, zooming in on every picture and finding these little differences like, oh, well, this camera makes it look a little bit brighter or a little bit better exposure, and because of those little minute details, I need to buy a whole new phone and I need to sell my old one and pay the difference, whether it's $200, $300, $400. The truth is, the smartphone companies have everything to gain from turning you into a picture snob and getting you more and more picky so that you feel like you gotta spend all this extra money each year, when in reality, most of these pictures you're gonna be sharing and looking at down the road, a lot of them are gonna be compressed on social media or compressed by YouTube if you're filming YouTube videos. The bitrate is just steamrolled by Google servers anyway, and you may disagree with me, and that's fine, but at least I'll know that for those of you out there that were on the fence and are considering upgrading but not quite sure, if I can influence you to try to be more comfortable with what you have, save yourself some money and use that towards, I don't know, a memory with a family member, or investing it in the stock market and turning it into more money so that you can retire younger and waste this rest of your life working really, really hard, then I'll appreciate knowing I influenced you in a positive way rather than, unfortunately, what a lot of tech YouTube does, and even myself in years prior. I don't want to influence you to feel like you need to buy something that you don't really need. And if you're absolutely convinced otherwise, no, for my job or my use case, I definitely need the best camera possible, even if it's just a couple of pixels improvement, like one camera is a little bit noisier than the other. Yes, that's worth the extra $200 to me. Then there was no need to convince you, and there was probably no need for you to watch this video anyway. But I do think that each year the camera upgrades will get progressively less noticeable. There's this law of diminishing returns where the human eye can't tell the difference, and maybe right now in the tech community it's really easy for us to notice the difference, but a lot of you are in your younger years with pretty healthy eyes. You may discover, just like a lot of my family members have discovered, when you're older and your eyes aren't as sharp as they used to be, you're not going to care too much about whether or not this memory was captured in 4K or 8K or 1080p. It's all going to look the same to you after a certain number of years. But the money you burn today may affect your working future or how much you have saved up for retirement later in life, which is why I think we should put a little bit more emphasis on what we're spending, maybe a little bit less emphasis on the background noise or grain of our everyday pictures. So feel free to dislike and unsubscribe if you feel like cameras need to be prioritized more, or everyone should be prioritizing these in their next phone purchase. But I know how I feel. I've just been very happy since downgrading to the iPhone 10, even though I agree, yes, this is an objectively worse camera than my last phone, but I'm not feeling any less happy because of it. So let me know how you guys feel down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.